Now having lived in Europe for over a decade, what are my top 3 pet peeves and what are the things that keep me here? Hi, I'm Brandon and I'm the business director at Nomad Capitalist. We help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs reach their full potential. So I've lived in many places in Europe over the last decade, and I still reside here for many reasons. But what are the top 3 things that I dislike and the top 3 things that I really appreciate about being on this continent? The first pet peeve, by and large, is service. Customer service on a whole in Europe is just not the same as the United States. There's not that same customer-centric features where the customer is always right in what they say and what they do. Well, we do know that customers are not always right, but at least there's an ability to put on a smile and assist. Some places in Europe are better at this than others. I was recently in Ireland and it was a very friendly experience. I was in other places in Europe and it was an opposite direction. So it's hard to generalize, but overall, service quality is much lower in many respects, whether it be in a restaurant or shop, than what you would typically find in the United States. It is getting better, it is improving with the new generations, but it's still not where I would like it to be. On the other hand, my first positive is accessibility. It always amazes me how you can simply hop on a plane and be in a completely new world, a completely new culture in a matter of hours, maybe even matter of minutes. Low-cost airlines are across the continent. Everywhere you can hop on a Wizz Air, Ryanair, EasyJet, and be someplace else. I can right now go from Warsaw to Italy in 2 hours. I could be in Germany in 45 minutes. I could be in Scandinavia in less than that. So the ease of being able to travel, to experience new countries, new cultures, new worlds, is very easy and is at your fingertips. I remember growing up in California that even getting from Los Angeles to San Francisco was a huge task. You take the I-5 and it's still 5 or 6 hours drive. 5 or 6 hours drive from where I'm at, I could be in a completely new world, a different language, a different culture, different set of foods, which I personally appreciate. In terms of my second negative, the bureaucracy. I'm sorry, but I think red tape was invented somewhere in Europe. The amount of bureaucracy in the matter of items that you have to go through, the hoops you have to do with the government, even for minor things, it is unbelievable. Yes, everywhere has bureaucracy in the world. The US, Canada, it's there. But in Europe, they take it to the next level. I honestly believe that the person who earns the most is the person who creates stamps. Those rubber stamps on every document. And it sometimes feels that you need to get a stamp on a stamp on a stamp to prove that the original stamp was the correct stamp. So the level of bureaucracy, especially for countries that are still coming out of the communist mindset with those historical relics, is sometimes very frustrating. I previously mentioned that I've applied for certain things in building a home thinking, oh, it'll be simple, and it definitely wasn't. So bureaucracy is the one thing that I think I could definitely do without. On the other hand, the positive with all that is you have so much at your fingertips in terms of lifestyle and culture. You have accessibility to performing arts everywhere. You have constant access, even in small places, to different events, festivals, and things like that. And of course, we have that in the United States. We have state fairs, we have local performances, but nowhere to where it is in Europe, where everywhere has something going on, something within art, culture, dance, theater, opera. It's all available at any point. Even in the smallest locations, I found that. And so for those that are looking for that growth, that exposure to museums, to art, it's a great place. Also, the historical architecture is everywhere. Right outside the window from where I'm shooting this video are buildings that are 500, 600, 700 years old. Growing up in California, anything greater than 30 or 40 years was considered old. Here, the historic vibe is everywhere, and that's across the entire continent. It's something I truly appreciate. In terms of my third and final drawback in living in Europe, is just cultural difference. If I go to a movie, especially an American movie, sometimes I'm the only one laughing because I get the humor, others don't. Also, there are small things that I think are just common courtesy that don't exist. For example, after a wedding and you give somebody a gift, you usually get a thank you card. Thank you cards cannot be found anywhere really in Europe. The concept is almost alien. For me, that's common courtesy, but for rest, that's a strange American difference, cultural aspect. So there are aspects of the culture that you have to basically accept when in Rome and accept that those are going to be differences. Whether they be that people don't get your jokes or your humor or where you think a certain courtesy should be extended and it's not, you do have to adapt and understand that the local feeling, the local sentiment may be very different than yours. Add language on top of that, and it's even more. Expressing yourself, even how hard you try in a foreign language that you've learned, will always be different than a native. And so you will come across some interesting situations, maybe some funny situations, but as a whole, it does become difficult. Even, for example, finding male camaraderie in being in a foreign country is hard. I've spoken to actually one of my colleagues at Nomad Capitalist, who's also an expat, and he said the same. Because of the different exposure and different experiences growing up, we find that there's sometimes a disconnect. But it can always be bridged. The last positive that I'd like to highlight is actually how dynamic Europe has become. Even with all that historical culture and those long-held beliefs, I'm always surprised how advanced a lot of countries are in Europe. Advanced in terms of entrepreneurship, advancement in terms of technology, and how they embrace that. When I was last in the United States, I realized how a lot of things from a technological perspective I take for granted living in Europe are still not there, right? Checks are unknown in Europe. Everybody does transfers. They now use, for example, things like Bleak, which all you do is put in a code and the funds are transferred in a matter of seconds. Every credit card is a tap card. And still in the US, a lot of times it's swipe. Chip pins are only coming in a lot of places. So they embrace new ways, they embrace new technologies, but also in terms of thought. I look at a lot of people who are now coming out of university or high school, especially in countries that were formerly communist, whether it's here in Poland, whether it's in the Czech Republic, Hungary, the Balkans, and they're always eager to advance. They are eager to embrace the newest ways to take risks and become entrepreneurs, find ways to do it. And a lot of times we think, well, America is the seat of capitalism. It's the place that you go for entrepreneurship. But what I'm finding is that is shifting. People are willing to take the risk, and the rate of company formation is much higher in Europe in a lot of places than it is even in the United States or Canada. And so I appreciate that change of mindset, how they could go from being behind the iron wall or iron curtain in some ways to being at the forefront is just a huge positive and a breath of fresh air as we advance in this world. So those are my top 3 and bottom 3 reasons why I like and dislike Europe. Maybe you'll have different ones and where you live will be unique to you. But make sure you go where you're treated best.